Hey everybody, Sean Lane here. I'm the Director of Operations at Drift and the host of our Operations podcast. Today on this video, we're going to take you a little bit deeper into one of our episodes from the podcast where we spoke with Brett Queener, who is a venture capitalist and a former Salesforce executive. Brett spent a better part of a decade at Salesforce in a variety of different operational roles. And so today we wanted to dive in on one of the lessons that he talked about around specialization. So Brett and I talked about a bunch in our conversation, but during my time chatting with him, one of the biggest things that I took away from it was how to handle specialization inside of a growing business. How to measure it, how to think about sales productivity when we're hiring new folks, and some of the key measurements along the way. So as a part of that, in my conversation with Brett, when I asked him, like, what did this look like at Salesforce and how did you specialize? He told me that for them, their kind of secret sauce, the Salesforce model, was they would find a segment, subdivide that segment, and focus on their execution. Specialize your marketing, specialize your sales, your product offering, your competitive, your training, and optimize the hell out of it. So what we wanted to do is take that lesson and show it to you today. So on the flip side of that, one of Brett's warnings around specialization was actually the idea of being a which, what, who. If you're not familiar, it comes from a Dr. Seuss book that Brett taught me about called I Wish That I Had Duck Feet. So in this book, the main character walks around saying, I wish that I had this, I wish that I had that. And at the end, the character says, I wish that I had everything. And they end up calling him a which, what, who, because he took so many different things that he wanted all at once. And Brett's warning is don't be a which, what, who. Don't try to be everything at once for everybody. So when you're picking a lane for which customer base you want to serve or how complex your sale is going to be, he said, bring the appropriate level of complexity that your buyer is willing to have. And so depending on which segment you're selling into and what product you're selling, that will help you to make that decision. So with that in mind, in this deck today, we're going to talk about how to measure specialization. We're going to talk about the Benioff rule, which Brett taught me about, which is how they talked about rep productivity at Salesforce during his time there. And then third, we're going to talk about how you calculate win rate versus close rate. And if, like me, you originally thought those were the same thing, you'll learn that, in fact, they are not. So on to number one. When you talk about measuring specialization, Brett said if you're talking to anyone who's explained their business to you and they're giving you funnel metrics like win rate or ASP or average sales cycle, if they're giving you those metrics outside of the context of what market they're serving or what segment they're talking about, it's completely meaningless. Blending those things together into one giant average, even though you might be serving different segments, can be completely misleading to your business. And so there's a big danger there of a zoomed out view. So in Brett's words, he said every step of the funnel should be measured within a specific business unit and don't measure those things in the aggregate. Okay, so that's lesson number one. Lesson number two comes down to rep productivity. One of the hardest things about putting together a go-to-market plan is figuring out how many humans you need to fulfill your plan. How many sales reps do you need? How long is their ramp going to be? How productive are they going to be at the end of that ramp? And what Brett told me is they would be having these types of conversations inside of Salesforce, and Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, had this really magical way of simplifying the entire thing. He would say, okay, how many people do we have? And then he would say, it's 50K per person on the team. 50K in ARR was the rep productivity goal, and that was how they forecasted and measured the entire business. So when you're stuck in the weeds trying to figure out what that perfect ramp looks like or what productivity is going to be, can you simplify your entire business down to how many reps you have and what their productivity is going to be? If productivity in a certain segment is at or above your target, keep hiring. You're probably already behind and you need more people on your team. If productivity in that segment is below your target, stop. Don't just keep hiring because the plan says that you should add more people to it, right? Stop what you're doing, fix something. There's some part of that funnel that might be broken. And then once you hit that productivity goal again, time to start hiring again. All right, so that's lesson number two. On to lesson number three. Brett talked me through the distinction between close rate and win rate. So when he talked about close rate, he talked about, as the numerator, the total number of opportunities won, and you divide that by the total number of opportunities won plus those that you lost to a competitor, plus those that you lost to no decision. So I asked Brett, it seems like he was being very specific about the categories of reasons why an opportunity got lost. And what he told me was of the entire population of things that get lost, he says they either get lost to a competitor or they get lost because no decision takes place. So we'll talk about the nuance there again in a second, but for him, that's what he thinks about as win rate. And if you're a fast growing business, he wants us to be targeting that close rate at around 33%. So if we flip the page and go into win rate, he talks about win rate as just the total number of won opportunities divided by the won opportunities plus those lost to competitor. So if you notice, he's taken out any opportunities that were lost because of no decision. And so what he's looking at here is he wants you to be targeting above 55% win rate, because when you're going up against a competitor, it teaches you completely different lessons than those opportunities that you might lose to no decision. So if you're going up against a competitor, you should have a better than 55% win rate. So as you're thinking about, okay, what do these different win rates or close rates help me answer about my business? What he says is, are we doing a good job of moving a conversation to a funded project? Basically what that means is if you're doing a good job, that means that your win rate versus a competitor should be what you're looking at. If you're not doing a good job, you'll have more opportunities that are being lost to no decision. That means that the team didn't do a good job of creating a use case or showing value in what the product could do, or maybe they just got happy ears that they thought that deal was going to move forward. But if you end up losing a deal because no decision took place, then that's a place where you can stop, go back, look, and figure out how you can help enable your team to create better use cases for your product. The second question is, okay, if we do get to a point where there's a funded project within that organization, were we selected as the vendor of choice? And this is where you can really zoom in on whether or not you're winning against your competitors. So tracking which competitors you're going up against, who you're winning against, who you're losing against, can be a great way to learn how to better enable your sales team and where those gaps might be. So that's the difference between a close rate and a win rate. If you have more questions that you want to hear from Brett, we have a full podcast episode with him where he break down a whole lot more than what we just covered in this video. So if you want to learn more, check out the Operations podcast in your feed. Search Operations inside of Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe. You can check out the episode with Brett and a whole bunch of other operational leaders who take us under the hood of companies that are in hypergrowth. Thanks.